Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, which is very popular. So we're letting people in as we speak. So we'll be a couple of minutes before we get going. Whilst we let people in, just a sort of a quick reminder of some of the WUN activities coming up and ongoing. As an introduction, I'm Jo Butlin. I'm one of the founders of WUN. So in terms of next events, we've got 2 more coming up after today's event. We've got a workshop on the 15th of November, which is I Am Remarkable workshop, relatively few places. So if you're keen to get involved in that, please do sign up quickly. It's a brilliant workshop that's run by Google and is really powerful. So highly recommended. We've also then got our face-to-face event, next face-to-face event on the 1st of December, which Microsoft is hosting for us. And it's all about innovation and utilities. So again, likely to be a very popular event. So please do sign up for tickets. So those are events. We've also got 2 more podcasts live, which have recently gone live, which are with Lily Frenchman, who's the chief exec of the ADE, and she's talking very much about her experience of negotiation, so very pertinent to today's discussion and conversation. And Lily, for those who don't know her, is a great lively character, so really worth listening to. And also anybody who's in the energy sector who is trying to get their head around understanding what's going on in the markets. Kate Mulvaney, one of who works at Cornwall Insight, is discussing REMA and talking about what it's trying to achieve and what the issues are with it. Kate's again a brilliant enthusiast for this subject matter and really good to listen to, so highly recommended there. Other activities as well, mentoring. For those of you who haven't yet got a mentor, please do sign up, or either as a mentor or as a mentee. It's a really thriving program. We've got over 100, I can't remember the exact number, about 120 live mentees at the moment, and as you can see, lots of mentors. So it's a really thriving program, well worth signing up for. And actually, just going back to that podcast piece, if you've got a great story to tell and you want to share it, please do get in touch. We're always interested in sort of new people to host or be interviewed on podcasts for us. And then the last one I just wanted to flag before I introduce Lillian is, 2 more actually. One, we're looking for new advocates. So Lillian, I'm about to introduce, is one of our advocates. We're looking for a water advocate. Bring passion, expertise about the water sector and really help WUN develop and thrive, and work with a great bunch of people as well. So lots of pluses both ways if you're an advocate. And the final one I was going to flag was the survey, which we've recently published. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read it. There's a lot in there, a lot about how women feel as opposed to just statistical numbers. And I think that's really what we're trying to push internally. It's not just about, as we keep saying, it's not the women that need fixing, it's environments and cultures that need fixing. So a lot of insight in there, well worth a read. So hopefully we've now got a room full of people. We're up to 59. I think we might have a few more, but in the interest of time, I'm going to hand over to Lillian, who is one of our advocates, who can introduce herself, and our guest speaker today, Paul Fisher, who I am really excited to hear from. Thanks. Lillian.
Hi everyone, I'm Lillian Phillip and I'm the Senior Manager of Business Intelligence in the data world for sales and marketing at EDF. So I've been in the energy industry since university, and I'm really passionate about building really lasting and importantly fulfilling careers. Part of the reason I joined WUN. I've just come back to work about 6 months ago after having my second daughter, Lara. And outside of that, I'm also on the board as an associate non-executive director at the University Sussex Hospital Foundation Trust. Bit of a mouthful, but it covers 7 hospitals across the South Coast. And as you know, there's a huge amount of support there for the NHS. And they've got a fantastic ambition for equality and inclusion and empowering teams from the board all the way to the ward, really enacting change for their Patient First programme, which is all about agility and change for the patient experience as well. So that's really exciting. But today, I am very honoured to be introducing our speaker, Paul Fisher. He is an Associate Fellow at University of Oxford. He's the Programme Director of the Oxford Programme on Negotiation, which he's helped to design and develop since its inception 14 years ago in 2004. He also teaches on a variety of programmes such as preparation and negotiations, decision-making, persuasion, stakeholder management, and a whole host of other things, including multi-party and multi-issue negotiations. More recently, he's co-written a number of negotiation simulations, including building a football stadium, and very topically designed one specifically for virtual negotiations as well. He has a huge interest in leadership and inclusion for women of the future, including capacity building in government financial sector, helping support the growth and prosperity of small countries. He graduated from the University of Liverpool with a degree in politics, and he's also a certified business coach and cross-cultural trainer. He's had over 20 years of experience across a number of fields, and we're very excited to be hosting him today and bringing experience from his work across the World Bank, decommissioning of dams, all sorts of things that he's been getting involved in, including with IBM, BT, and as well as governments.
By having
and the United Arab
these
So, over to you, Paul.
Re-register.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Oh, is there someone
Yes.
not on mute? I think we need to put
Yes.
someone on.
Transaction.
Was that the estate agent?
No, that was.
We have some sort of background noise going on at the moment. Not quite sure. Anyway, no, that's fine. Great. So welcome. Very nice to be with you today. Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you, Lillian. Thank you, Hayley, for inviting me. Thank you, Helen and Keris, for helping out with logistics. And it's great to be here. I've been reading up about the Women's Utility Network WUN, and you obviously do a tremendous job in building a community of women who can connect, support, develop, and encourage each other in the utilities sector. So really good to be here. I'd like to make this session as interactive as possible. So feel free to interrupt me or put your hand up, or if you've got any specific questions, do let me know. And to start off with, just to get in the negotiation frame of mind, I'm going to pose a couple of questions for you. And the first one, if Keris, if you wouldn't mind putting the poll up, is how often do you think you negotiate? How often do you negotiate? And I've got a supplementary question to that, is what are your typical negotiations? Maybe if you could put in the chat that sort of typical negotiations you tend to be involved in. So those are my questions. How often do you negotiate? Is it every day, only occasionally, every month, every week? And what are your kind of typical negotiations? And they can be personal negotiations as well. Don't necessarily need to be in your professional environment. So Nikki, bedtime. Yeah, I think I know where you're coming from there. I imagine you're probably negotiating with some fairly young children. Doesn't get any easier. I've got a 17-year-old daughter, and negotiate with her is one of the biggest challenges. Negotiating how much work, deadlines, with teams in your company, absolutely. And these negotiation internally is something we do the whole time, and it's actually quite difficult. It's actually sometimes harder to negotiate internally because you kind of know the people you're negotiating with as it is externally. So Beth, debt management, Gail, scheduling, Emma, kids again, Georgina, prioritizing tasks, again, prioritization with Joanne, fees, absolutely, Nikki, and negotiating with clients, with suppliers. So essentially, as you can see there, well, we negotiate, 62% say we negotiate every day. And I think you're probably right. I think actually most of you probably negotiate sometimes without realizing it. We essentially negotiate all the time. Now, of course, there's the big high profile negotiations we think about. We've obviously had a slightly traumatic negotiation in the UK over the last few years in terms of leaving the European Union. We have the negotiations, which are probably the most important negotiations going on in the world in terms of the future of our planet, the COP26, the COP27, right through to everyday negotiations we do, buying and selling a house, in our daily lives, as I said, with children, and of course in our work as well, prominent in our careers, particularly in the utilities. So suppliers, joint ventures, negotiating budgets, resources, negotiating for yourself and negotiating salaries, flexible working. And I'd say as negotiations, organizations become flatter, and there's less hierarchy, essentially it's essential to leadership as well, really, in terms of asking people to do things you want to do. And I think sort of in the post-COVID world as well, with working conditions becoming a little bit more idiosyncratic, I mean, everything essentially is negotiable. So negotiation really happens all the time. So if I could give a definition of negotiation, I'm just going to quickly share my screen now. I would say that negotiation is essentially a back and forth communication designed to reach an agreement where you and the other side have some interests that are shared and some interests that are opposed. So essentially, putting it another way, it's a conversation between people and you want to get from point A to point B, and you can exert some kind of influence over the process, and your counterpart can as well. I think there's a well-known diplomat called Daniel Ver who described a negotiation as the art of letting the other side have your way. But it's also important to note that actually the research shows that women are actually less likely than men to use negotiation to get what they want. So let me give you an example. There's an academic called Linda Babcock from the US, and she looked at the starting salaries of MBA students at the well-known business school and was trying to figure out why men tended to get on average a higher starting salary by 7.6%. And that over the period of a career can lead to hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of discrepancy. And what she found was that whereas 57% of men negotiated their salaries, only 7% of the female students did. And so that is one of the sort of the issues quite often. And it's exemplified in a really good book called Women Don't Ask, where actually men tend to negotiate more than women. So, I mean, why do you think that is? I mean, is that to do with society? Is that to do with the fact that you like to think that you're going to be rewarded for doing a really good job? What's going on there? Interested to get your thoughts in the chat, or take your mic off and speak as well. Women, Sadia, that's interesting. Do you want to take your mic off and explain what you mean by that?
Yes, I do. So, and I'm a very good example. I tend to focus on the actions and the work I want to do, and the fact that I love the job, and forget that it's equally important to be rewarded for what you love doing. So it's always the last on my list, and I won't put much effort into even researching if I'm being paid the accurate amount. As long as I love the job and enjoy it, it's mostly where I tend to focus on.
Absolutely. So yeah, so it's all about how much you derive, how much satisfaction you get out of the job. And lots of interesting comments there. And I think we're going to come on to another survey question in a minute, but yes, I think there's a danger. Sometimes women worry that that might impact relationships. I think confidence is a key issue, and I hope in this half an hour, one of the key goals is to give you a little bit more confidence in negotiating, because anxious negotiators don't tend to be very good negotiators. They tend to accept the first offer which is made to them. They make concessions. They just want to get out of the room. They just really dislike the adversarial nature of negotiations. And I'm actually going to argue that negotiations don't actually have to be like that. And actually quite often some of the skills that women have are really, really important in a negotiation. So lots of other stuff there. I'm going to have to save the chat at the end, because I'm sure there's lots of really, really valuable stuff. But I think, I mean, one of the key things, I think opportunity doesn't always knock. And there's a danger sometimes if you're doing a really good job and you expect to be rewarded, and in the most progressive companies you would be in organizations, but that's not always the case. So I've got another quick question I just want to ask you in the poll. So if I could ask Keris, how much do you enjoy negotiating? Do you love the challenge of negotiating? Do you kind of find it okay sometimes? Or do you find it a bit of an ordeal? Do you find the sort of the competitive nature of negotiations a bit of an ordeal? And feel free to, a bit of an ordeal. Caesar, why do you think it's such an ordeal? Why do you Do you go into a cold sweat every time you've got to negotiate? Anyone else like to comment? Susan, do you find, so Susan, you, oh right, yes, okay, you do, okay. But on the other hand, Melissa, you really enjoy it, do you? Do you want to explain why you enjoy it? Do you enjoy the cut and thrust of negotiations?
Yeah, no, I quite enjoy taking people on a journey and going a bit of back and forth and getting a result that both people are happy with, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah.
I find it quite exciting to get a bit competitive with it. I think it's a really good drive.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Anise? You find it a bit stressful?
Yeah, I think at the time I find it stressful, but in the end, even if I lost out, it seemed like a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end, when you can look back, you're more satisfied. And Tamsin, absolutely. I think I find car dealerships quite stressful and not that's not the most pleasant negotiation. But the interesting research actually shows here, and this is actually kind of backed up. Actually, only just over 10% of you actually really enjoy the challenge of negotiation. That it often splits down gender lines, and that this excellent book called Women Don't Ask by Linda Babcock and Sari Lashover cites numerous research where women tend to shy away from negotiations. Why? Because they see it as adversarial, they see it as impacting relationships, and interestingly, a lot of women tend to be much more comfortable negotiating on behalf of other people or their organization than directly on behalf of themselves. There was an organizational psychologist who put up this list of metaphors and asked men and women to tell her what ones they identified with negotiation. And men went for metaphors like winning a ball game or wrestling matches, and women used examples like going to the dentist. So one of the objectives in this short session is firstly to argue against this approach where negotiation is adversarial, it's competitive, you know, it's fighting, trying to extract as much value for yourself. It doesn't have to be like that. And secondly, is to try and make you a little bit more confident in your negotiations. There's lots of research which shows the gender gap really narrowing if you have more experience and more confidence in the negotiation. So how can we narrow this gap? Well, what I'm going to do today is just give you 5 principles that I can guarantee if you use them, it will absolutely make you more effective as negotiators. And as I said, I'm going to argue against this idea that negotiations has to be a competitive sport, and sometimes it can tap into skills where women often tend to be more effective than men. So to start off with, I'm just going to ask you very quickly, Keris is going to put you into rooms. You've got 90 seconds, and I just want you to find out things you have in common with your counterpart. It can be anything. It can be values, politics, families, social status. So Keris, if you wouldn't mind putting people into groups, it's just 90 seconds. So go for it.
Just going to, I'll leave it for about 30 seconds and then
Okay,
I'll
brilliant,
let everyone back in, because I think it gives them 60 seconds when they when I close the rooms.
Yeah, it's a very, very short breakout.
Yeah, no problem.
Lots of great stuff in the chat. It's
oh, amazing. I'll make sure to download the chat so we have it.
That'd be great. Yeah, you kind of struggle to pick up on everything as it comes through.
Just, yeah, I was just sitting there, you know. All fine. Right, I'm going to close the rooms now and then we can carry on if that's all right.
Yeah,
60 seconds. Great.
It's gone that quickly. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so they got 60 seconds, haven't they? So
no problem. Right, I'll close all the rooms. People will be winging their way back in now. You can tell people are chatting because no one's coming back in.
Let me know, Keris, when you think everyone is back.
They should be returning now.
I know, Emma, you were on your own, so you had to talk to yourself. Oh dear. Sorry to hear that. I could have come and joined you. Oh no, sorry, Liz. Oh, got you two together. Sorry about that.
Well, I had loads in common.
Well, that's good to know, isn't it? Yeah, you'd be worried if you found you didn't have yourself. So welcome back. If you want to put anything on the chat, obviously with the numbers we've got, we can't go through all the pairs. But if you want to put anything on the chat in terms of what you found in common, or very briefly take your mic off and give me a few words, please feel free to. Did you find
I'll kick off, Paul. We both loved rowing machines, ergos in the gym, and we both love Chopin nocturnes. There we are.
Brilliant, brilliant, very good, very good. Meat eaters, very good. All have pets. All pets and wear glasses. Compliance training and development. Excellent nails. Amazing how much information you could get off each other in 90 seconds. Traveling, yeah, young children. Great, it's all coming in. Jobs in common as debt collectors, right? This goes so interactive. Let's get. Oh, sorry, Georgie. I hope that wasn't an ordeal for you. What is the point I'm making here? Well, this is my first principle in negotiation, and it's really, really important. And that is focus on relationships. We encourage you to think of negotiation as a collaboration. Your counterpart is not your opponent. He or she is your partner, and you're collaborating together to solve a problem. And relationships, just building up a relationship with someone really does work. Let me give you some research. There was two groups of MBA students. They were split into two groups. They had exactly the same negotiation. One group was told, time is money, get straight down to business, no small talk. And the second group was said, spend 20 minutes, we're told, spend 20 minutes, find out what you have in common, find out a little bit about each other. In the first group, which got straight down to the negotiation, 55% got a deal. In the second group, where there was a little bit of small talk, finding out about each other, 90% got a deal, and the deal actually was on average 18% better. So it really does work, building that relationship. It's the cornerstone of negotiation, particularly if you're negotiating with someone again and again. So how can we build relationships? Well, the science in persuasion tells us we like people who we're similar to, who we have things in common with. And obviously these days, it's much easier to find out what you have in common before you can even meet, in terms of LinkedIn. We like people who we have associations with. So similarity and associations are really important in terms of getting to know people and building that relationship. There's a second point about relationships I want to demonstrate to you. And I'm going to demonstrate to this by showing you a very short video. It's basically a video of some female capuchin monkeys, and they're with a researcher, and the researcher is handing stones to the monkeys. They have to hand them back, and one monkey receives grapes and the other receives cucumbers. And I think you'll gather pretty early on that the grapes are much nicer than the cucumbers. And there's a little bit of audio, but it's not that important.
First piece she eats, then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task, and we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us, and that's what she does. And she gets a grape, and she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is
it's quite a famous bit of research, actually. It was conducted by Sarah Brosnan and Francis WUN4ALL at Emory University in Atlanta. And it's this idea of fairness. So if both monkeys had received cucumbers, it would have been absolutely fine. But the fact is that one received the grape and one received the cucumber. And what they described it as was, the technical term was disadvantageous inequity aversion. But essentially, it's that idea that we have an instinctual aversion to getting less than someone else. And what applies to monkeys applies to humans as well, where fairness is really, really important. So people want to be treated fairly in any walk of life, and it's really important to relationships. And in a negotiation context, it's really important as well. And people will actually act against their interests if they don't feel that they're being treated fairly. So what you feel emotionally at the end of a negotiation is often every bit as important as to how you actually do objectively. So it's important in negotiations to put yourself into your counterpart's shoes, understand, do they feel like they're being respected? Do they feel like they're being listened to? Do they think that the process is fair? So framing issues around fairness can be really, really powerful in a negotiation. It also links into implementation as well. So you might have signed a deal, but if someone doesn't feel like they've been treated fairly, it's not going to necessarily lead to a very strong relationship moving forward. And another really important link to this is justifying things. And this has a gender dimension as well. So by justifying, when for example, you make an offer or simply a salary negotiation, you say, I think I should be paid this amount, or we're dealing with a supplier, always try and justify it. Think of any kind of rationales, any market research, any legal precedents, anything which can help you justify your case. And it plays into, particularly for women, it plays into self-confidence. I mentioned salary negotiations, but if you can get data which can really objectively demonstrate your value in the workplace, you'll be that much more powerful in negotiating. So, and there's lots of information out there. If you go to Glassdoor, PayScale, salary.com, there's lots of information out there which you can help to justify yourselves when you're negotiating. And the research shows that if women have those justifications, have that data, it doesn't need to just be salary, they tend to be more effective negotiators as a result. And obviously it's extremely difficult sometimes, particularly if you take a career break, you come back into the workplace. And I think a recent study by PwC found that 3 out of 5 women returning to the workforce moved to a lower skill role than when they left. So if you, and reduced earnings as a result. So if you can focus on justifications, it can be really, really effective and give you that much more confidence. And a simple example of justifications is a very, very simple word, the word because. If you use that word because, it can be really, really powerful. This is a famous survey that research project which was done in the US. It was basically people trying to get to the front of a photocopy machine. They were in 3 groups and they had to make these 3 requests. May I use a Xerox machine? I have 5 pages. May I use a Xerox machine because I'm in a rush? And may I use the Xerox machine because I have to make copies, which is fairly self-explanatory. And these were the figures. The most interesting one, notice it goes up to 60 to 94% making a justification. But this is the really interesting one. It goes up to 93% just by using the word because. But at the same time, it's completely obvious. Of course, you want to use the Xerox machine to make copies. So just think about that. When you're putting any proposals forward in negotiations, think of the word because. Now, my second principle is the importance of focusing on interests, not positions. Now, can anyone tell me what the difference is between interests and positions? What's the difference? Think of it as a pyramid. Positions are when you say things like, I must do this, or this is unacceptable to me, or this is a red line, or I cannot move on this. And interests are the beliefs, the motivations, the goals that make up those positions. So let me give you a very, very famous example. It's called the story of the orange. You have 2 children arguing over an orange. There's one orange, there's a parent, the brother and the sister. I want the orange, though. I want the orange, though. I want the orange. And what does the parent do? He does the obvious thing, cuts the orange down the middle. Then the sister takes the orange and very carefully takes off the peel, throws away the main part of the orange, and then uses the peel to zest the cake. And the brother, he rips off the peel, not interested in the peel, and uses the orange, I don't know, to have a glass of orange juice. So if the parent had asked, not you know, why you want the orange, if they'd ask, you know, what are the reasons for you wanting the orange, both the brother and the sister could have got what they wanted. So it's really important in a negotiation, not just to ask what people want, but most importantly of all, why people want it. And you'd be amazed sometimes how often compatible interests underlie incompatible positions. So find out why people want it, really dig in there and ask questions. And quite often actually in the negotiation, try and bring more value and issues to the table. Ironically, in negotiations, sometimes the more issues you have and the more differences in priorities you have between the different issues, the more opportunity there is to create a really good deal. Because obviously you tend to have things which are really important to you, and you also have things which are not that important to you, but really important to your counterpart. So that's where you can start trading and negotiations. So really focus on that interest rather than positions. It's really, really effective, and it quite often opens up negotiations to much more value. And try and think, for example, if you're doing a salary negotiation or even a supplier negotiation, the more issues you can think of and bring to the table, the more powerful and more likely you are to get a really good deal. So for a salary negotiation, bring in private health insurance, season loans, equity options, bonus policies, working from home issues. You know, the more issues you can bring into the negotiation, the more likely you are to be able to get a deal. So there are things which are important to you and things which are important to your counterpart. So that's my second principle. But of course, in order to find out about someone's interests, there's a really important skill that we all need to do, and that is the importance of listening and questioning. So that is my third principle. Now, we don't tend to be very good at listening. For example, Livia, can I use you as would you mind taking your mic off? So Livia, tell me a little bit about, have you got any plans for holidays next year, or take any time off, or what's your plans?
Yeah, I'm going to Ireland for my dad's birthday. So my
Ireland.
Yeah.
I went to Ireland. That's interesting. I actually really did go to Ireland last summer. I went and stayed in a castle with some friends. But anyway, sorry, go on.
We're actually going to Northern Ireland, so we're going to go to see the
Okay,
Bridge.
Okay. Sorry, go on. Go Northern Ireland. I've been to Northern Ireland as well. Yeah, whereabouts are you going?
The Devil's Causeway. We're going to try.
That looks fantastic. Yeah. Are you feeling there's a lot of listening going on here?
No, not really.
I'm finding it quite. That's kind of directive listening, and we are. It's amazing actually how poor we tend to be at listening. And one of the issues is that, and thank you very much for being my guinea pig. One of the issues is that we tend to speak at about 120 words a minute, but we think at about 700 words a minute. And so sometimes we're listening, but we're spending most of the time thinking how it applies to me. What am I going to say next? And what I'd encourage you to do in a negotiation is try and sort of suspend judgment. Try and be in the moment, and sort of, rather than sort of thinking about, you know, what am I going to do after this? What's my action list after the meeting? Or what question am I going to ask? Really try and listen, because you'd be amazed how much information you can get from your counterpart just by listening. Silence, for example, sometimes people feel very uncomfortable with silence. And one of the dangers is that you feel uncomfortable with silence. You start filling the void and giving too much information. I mean, sometimes people make an offer and people are really quiet, so they actually start negotiating against themselves. Go, okay, well, in that case, will you accept, you know, a little bit less? So I'd say listening is really important, and this is what we call active listening. I'm sure many of you have come across this. This is the Chinese character for listening, but listening is a whole body experience. We listen with our ears, to listen, to pay attention, to note the words spoken, but also the tone, the pace, the emphasis helps us understand. We use our eyes to connect. Not as easy online, but I look at the green light shining at me, but to show that we have your attention, we use our mind to consider the words and ideas shared, and we use our hearts to listen, to empathize with the person we're listening to. So it's really about being in the moment, nodding, catching the eye. Paraphrasing sometimes is quite useful. So you might say, so thank you for that. So if I'm correct in thinking you're going to the Giant Causeway in November, or X is more important to you than Y, it just can be really, really powerful. And there's a brilliant book called You're Just Not Listening by a journalist from the New York Times called Kathy Murphy. And it really is truly transformative. It's a whole book about listening. And I think almost all of us, ultimately, we want to understand and we want to be understood. And listening is absolutely essential to that. Livia, go for it.
Yeah, I have a question on the nodding, because I've been told previously that often women are better at nodding and giving physical cues when they are listening, and whether they're appreciative of something. And that can actually translate to not being asked as much because we're nodding along. The presenter assumes that we're on board with what is being said, so we're not asked our opinion as much. I didn't know if you had a view on. Oh,
that's interesting. I have to admit, I've never heard that. But that's an interesting point, actually. I mean, it kind of links in a bit to questioning as well, doesn't it? Where you
I have tried it. I have gone into a meeting and deliberately not nodded along, and it was immediately noticeable because someone said, "Livia, you look unsure. Does that make sense?"
No,
and so I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a difference between nodding too much, as if you'll completely accept what they're saying, and the kind of poker face, making no emotions, no nodding, and people get concerned. So I mean, I think, I mean, nodding, you need to be careful with nodding, but you don't want to use it too much. But I think it can be quite effective. One thing which is quite effective is called mirroring, and that is where you essentially just repeat the last two words which were said by your counterpart at the end of their sentence. And it just kind of, there's an FBI negotiator who uses it the whole time when he's negotiating hostage negotiations, and it kind of just reinforces that kind of relationship where you just mention, just the two words, it just kind of reinforces it. But it's a multifaceted area, listening, and it's not easy. Active listening actually is really quite difficult. You wouldn't want to do it the whole time. If you did it with all your friends, every time you went for dinner, they might start to find you quite exhausting. But it is important just to kind of be in that moment. And what I'd say also is questioning is really important as well. And questioning is almost a form of listening, because you're basically investing in the answer. And so in negotiations, and I've got a list of powerful questions, but I'd encourage you to question, to probe, to use open questions that elicit information. So, for example, tell me what's on your agenda at the moment. That's about building a rapport, about building empathy, understanding the demands and the pressures of the other person. How can we work together to find a solution? This kind of work all in this together. What would it take to? This is an academic from Yale called Zoe Chance, and she calls that the magic question. It's a kind of catalyst for creativity. It shows respect, it shows humility on your part. You don't know all the answers, and it can also really unearth important information. There's another one which is called the implementation question. You wouldn't want to use it too often, but sometimes it can be quite powerful. So, for example, in US politics, when they're phoning up, can I rely on your vote for the congresswoman from Illinois? And they say, yes, yeah, I think I'll vote for her. And then they say, so how are you going to vote for her and when? And they go, well, I finished work at 6 o'clock. Is there a polling booth actually on my way home? And by actually developing that narrative, they're more likely to vote, and voting actually goes up 30%. So it can be quite effective, but you wouldn't want to do it the whole time. When and how are you going to do this? When are you going to do this? You need to balance it in terms of how you do it. And the other thing I said is often the worst questions are those not asked at all. So, and we all do it sometimes, don't we? When we have a conversation, we don't quite understand what they're saying, but we let it go because we just want the conversation to continue. Don't be afraid to ask questions, because it can be really effective, and it's amazing again how much information you get. And Sumia, absolutely, women don't ask. The title of the book I mentioned at the beginning, really important. Okay, so we've got another sort of 5 or 6 minutes. I've just got a question for you now. What do you think is more persuasive out of these statements? The first one, by implementing this new smart meter, you can generate savings of X pounds per year. Or the second one, by failing to implement this new smart meter, you will lose X pounds per year. What do you think is a more persuasive approach? Maybe the first or so second one, yeah, just put one or two else. Why do you think, okay, everyone's coming in for two, so let me pick someone. Oh no, okay, so what about, let's have a quick look. Catherine, Coffin, two. Why do you think it's the second one?
So I reckon that people will feel worse about losing something they think they already have than doing something that costs them an effort to get something over and above that.
Absolutely. There's a few people who said one, actually. So thank you for that. Tessa, why do you think one?
Yeah, I suppose just it's more positive language and it's going to get somebody's, people are going to be engaged.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and we tend to sort of focus on benefits, you know, benefits more positive. Well, the answer actually is the second one. And the reason for this is something called loss aversion. And what this means is that people feel pain more powerful. Pain tends to be more powerful than pleasure. So people feel the negative effects of a loss twice as much as the positive effects of a gain. And what this tends to happen is it's used in negotiation a lot, actually. People tend to be more risk-seeking when they're facing a loss because they're desperate to avoid it, and more risk-averse when they face a gain. So this is called loss aversion. There's lots of information on the internet about it, but pain often is more powerful than pleasure. So quite often, if you talk about, you know, what you stand to lose from something, it tends to have more resonance than talking about what you actually stand to gain. Let me give you another example. What's more persuasive here? Asking your boss for a raise of $500 a month or asking for a raise of $6,000 a year? What do you think is more persuasive here? So going for one. So why do you think one? Nikki, why are you going for one?
Sorry, muting issues. So I'm going for one because I think it sounds like you're asking for less.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, this happens the whole time in marketing, doesn't it? And you know, in terms of mortgages, if you ever got told actually how much money you're paying over the life of a mortgage, you probably never get a mortgage in the first place. So it's all about how you frame information and units of measure. And this is my fourth principle. How you frame information in a negotiation can have a really, really big impact. So how you frame information, whether it's a gain or a loss, or frame it based on units, it can be really, really powerful. And one of the kind of underlying reasons for this is, in a negotiation, you think you might have an amazingly objective, rational argument, but quite often, if you can tap into emotions and tap into instincts, it can be that much more powerful. So it's about the psychology of presenting something. It influences our willingness to buy products, and it affects our perception of what's being presented to us. So, I mean, let me give you another example here in terms of how you present information. So this is a choice of headphones. You know, there's the opportunity to buy some headphones. You're doing your research on the internet, and you have two choices here. You've got the Beats Solo priced at £249, rated 7 out of 10, or you've got the Beats Studio priced at £299, rated 8 out of 10. Which one would you go for? You're going to go for the Solo or the Studio? So, okay, it looks like a majority are going for the Studio. Okay. What happens if you and quite a few people are going for the first one. What happens if you throw another one in, the Beats Pro? This is priced at £350. It rates 7 out of 10. Does this change where you go in any way? Number of people are going for two, going for Sada and Liz, Imogen, going for number two. This is something which is used in marketing the whole time. We run this workshop a lot, and quite often, if you get the choice of two, about 50% go for the Beats Studio. If you bring in the Beats Pro, this actually goes up to 75%. Why is that? Well, beforehand, when you just had a choice of two, you could easily go for the Beats Solo, But if the Beats Pro comes in, you think, well, that's a little bit expensive. I don't really want to go for the Beats Pro, but the Beats Solo, well, I'm not that cheap. So you tend to go for the Beats Studio. So the sole purpose of bringing in this third dimension, the Beats Pro, is they're not expecting you to buy it. They don't even want you to buy it. They want to drive your decision towards the higher margin Beats Studio. So how you present information and giving free choices can be really, really powerful. Apple do it the whole time. So for example, at Apple, you have storage capacity. You can have 16 gigabytes. Sorry, my Apple Pen doesn't seem to be working very well. You might have 16 gigabytes at 199, 64 at 299, or 128 at 399. They quite often miss out the 32. By offering those free options, Apple is shifting consumer preferences, and they want you to go towards the one in the middle, the 64 gigabytes. So it's how you frame information can be really powerful. Henry Kissinger used to say to presidents when he gave them advice, he said, we've got three options here. We could have an all-out nuclear war, we could surrender, or we could have my preferred policy. So how you actually present information can be really, really powerful. Okay, this is my final principle, my one final principle. And I'm going to start it with a question. How many of you do you think set really ambitious goals in a negotiation? How ambitious are you with your negotiation goals? There's loads of questions here. We'll save them to the Q&A. So how ambitious are you with your goals? Very ambitious? Not ambitious? Do you think you could be more ambitious? Jasmine, you're super ambitious with your goals. Yeah, really aspirational. Jennifer, not very. A few moderates, fairly. Well, goals are really important in a negotiation because, of course, if you haven't got goals, you don't know how successful you're going to be. So they really anchor the agreement and provide a structure. It was Henry Kissinger who said, actually, again, using him as an example, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up in the road to nowhere. But of course, in negotiations, you need to prioritize goals. And what you tend to do is you need to focus on what I must have in the negotiation. If I don't have it, it would be better not to negotiate at all. What I'd like to have, what would be really nice, and then what would I like to have in an ideal world. And again, the research shows that not enough women kind of address this point, what I would like to have in an ideal world. Again, research from Linda Babcock and Sari Lashover found that male negotiators tend to set goals that are about 50% more aggressive than women. And the research also shows that the more aspirational you are with your goals, the more you actually tend to get. So, for example, if you have a 30% increase in your goal, you're likely to get at a minimum a 10% increase in the end result. So, for example, take the obvious example of a salary negotiation. So if you target 50,000 as what you want to get, or if you might want to target, say 30,000 above, 30% above, 65,000. If you go for 50,000, you'll probably get 50,000. But if you go for 65,000, you'll probably get a 10% increase. So you'll end up with 55,000. So the research actually shows that the more ambitious you are on goals, the more you're likely to achieve. So this is really my fifth principle. And this is the focus on aiming high. So don't be afraid in a negotiation to aim high. The research shows that quite often, it doesn't impact relationships as much as you think. It doesn't. I mean, I think people mentioned earlier, there's this image, if you ask for too much or you aim too high, you're considered bossy or demanding. But the research shows actually that if you have the confidence and if you tend to aim high, you will tend to achieve more in the negotiation. So it's really, really important. And what's also quite useful in terms of doing this is asking yourself the question, what do I want if I knew for sure that I would get it? So take aside, perhaps maybe the potential worry about prestige, the financial downside, maybe the political costs, and start with what would I want if I knew I was going to get it? And then you might want to adapt it a little bit. But I really, really encourage you to aim high. Really, really important in a negotiation, and something, again, that men tend to be better than women at doing. So that is essentially my 5 principles. So what's the time? It's 1:49. Those are my 5 principles. And the final thing I'd say about these principles are the research shows quite often that using these principles, actually women tend to be more effective. So for example, there was a study done by 2 academics, Jennifer Halpin and Judy McLean-Park, and there was a negotiation where people wanted to build a children's playground, and all the groups were split into all male pairs and all female pairs, and there was 2 roles. One was the role of the member of the parks committee. The other was a member of a community organization trying to build a playground. And the research found that at the beginning, men were 9 times as likely to be aggressive and competitive in their negotiation tactics, you know, sort of ultimatums. And they also found that whereas 92% of men focused on positions, only 23% of women focused on positions and instead focused on interests. And when it came to actually finding out information, listening and questioning, women were found to be much more effective, actually 10 times as effective in terms of getting information. So the result was a more successful negotiation with the all women pairs. So I think that would be my kind of final thought is, if you use these principles and you focus on negotiation not being a competition, but actually a more of a collaboration, working together, focus on relationships, aim high, find as much data to justify and to give you confidence, there's no reason why we cannot start to narrow that negotiation gap. Any questions after that? I've hit you with lots of information, but I'm sure there was lots of questions in the chat. So I don't know, Joe, if you picked up any questions.
Yeah, I've picked up questions. I've got hundreds of questions to ask you myself, but I know there's lots out there. But one that I picked up in the chat along the way was how women can manage emotion in negotiations. And I think we've all sort of suffered from, if you're feeling very passionate about something, you can get almost over emotional. And I think that's something that comes up quite often in WUN, actually. So any tips there? Yeah,
I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, I think it's okay to be, I mean, we're all humans, so it's okay to show emotions, but the research shows, again, emotions they tend to be contagious. So if you get angry, your counterpart might get angry, and angry negotiators don't tend to be good negotiators. I mean, I'd say sometimes you might feel really angry. You're getting undermined in the negotiation. We've had brilliant people come on Oxford program who are fairly young women, but absolutely brilliant, leading negotiation teams in certain parts of the world. And they're the negotiation leader, but the counterparts don't address them directly. They address a much more junior male counterpart on their team. And you can imagine how annoying that is, how frustrating. So, I mean, but in terms of emotions, what I'd encourage you to do is just as preparation is really important in negotiation. Prepare as much as you can before you get to the table. And in a way, it's quite good to prepare an emotional strategy as well. So look at some of the scenarios. How would I feel if this happened? How would I feel if that happened? And try and manage it. And I think if you can keep calm, I think sometimes if you really feel angry, take a time out and maybe sort of leave the room and try and sort of step back, because angry negotiators tend to often reveal more information about themselves, and you can actually gauge a lot of information which might be to your benefit during the negotiation. So and it's also important to understand, for example, with anger, it's important to understand the difference between people who are genuinely angry, because if they're genuinely angry, sometimes they just want to let off steam, they just want to be listened to. So sometimes it's just a good idea just to listen. But if they're tactically angry, if they're trying to use it as a tactic, obviously the worst thing you could do is start to make concessions, to start to get flustered. Because what are they going to do? If they feel it's working, they're going to keep on doing it, aren't they? So on in those occasions, maybe it might be worth saying, I can see we're not getting anywhere today. Let's take a time out. Maybe we should meet in a week's time and actually leave the room. I mean, the key thing is not to get flustered. If anger is being thrown at you, don't start making concessions. Don't start getting flustered, because obviously that's not going to be effective in the negotiation. If you're getting angry, I'd encourage you sometimes to take a bit of a time out, just take a bit of time away from the table, and really try to understand why they're being angry.
They're brilliant, and that resonates a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, in fact, most of what you've said resonates a lot. It's really good practical advice. One of the other questions just came through, and please, if anybody's got a question, raise hands as well. We've got a few more minutes. One of them was almost, how does the sort of the principle of fairness fit with some of the things you're talking about in terms of framing a piece? And I think there's something here about women naturally almost self-edit, so we'll sort of almost talk ourselves out of things before we start. So any thoughts?
Yes, that's the danger of that, isn't it? When you start self-editing, negotiating with yourself, so before you even got to the table, you started negotiating
down
things down. I mean, I think fairness is really important. And as I mentioned, actually it's more important sometimes how you feel subjectively at the end of a negotiation than actually how you've actually done. There's not necessarily a correlation between the two. And actually, if you finish a negotiation where you both feel like it's been a fair environment, you've both been listened to, it's going to lead to better objective results in the future. So I would encourage you in negotiation to try and frame issues around fairness. And it's kind of all about empathy, isn't it? Putting yourself in the other side's shoes. You know, you're probably under pressure in the negotiation. You've got people, your bosses giving you mandates, you've got pressures, you've got lots of stakeholders internally you need to address, and they almost certainly have got the same thing. So you kind of, if you can sort of help them out as well, it can be really effective. And one of the things we sometimes ask people to do is to write the victory speech of their counterpart, because that can be really helpful. And with justifications, which is an important part of fairness, if you tell people all the reasons why this is such a great offer, they can use that to go back to their bosses and tell them why they should accept your great offer. So I've kind of, that was a meandering answer.
No, all helpful. And actually, there's one that's got some traction in the chat, that probably the last question. If women and men use the same tactics in negotiation, do they therefore get the same response, or are we expecting women to behave like men?
I'd never encourage.
You're very brave coming to WUN, Paul.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, if you focus on these principles, you will definitely be more effective negotiators as a result. But I think it's all about confidence, really. If you've got the confidence, I think confidence and cooperation are probably the two really important C words to take out of this session. Realize that negotiation doesn't have to be a competitive, and you know, you might be come across a really aggressive man who, you know, coming from the Donald Trump school of negotiation, the art of the deal isn't on our recommended reading list, and sometimes, you know, it's really difficult dealing with someone like that. You can come in with all your tools of listening and questioning, and then you just get this male kind of bullying juggernaut coming towards you, and in situations like that, I mean, sometimes you can switch them by sort of trying to ask questions and listen and focusing on their interests, and there's other times where, I mean, sometimes you have to kind of question whether you want to be negotiating with this person, or, you know, whether you have to sort of mix up the team. But yeah, I wouldn't say so women should act more like men, because there's some pretty bad male negotiators. There's some absolutely brilliant women negotiators. I mean, Madeleine Albright was a brilliant negotiator. She was as Secretary of State in the United States, Angela Merkel. I mean, there's some really fantastic negotiators out there. But yeah, if you can focus on these principles, I think you could be more effective. And the book Women Don't Ask is really, really powerful. It's got lots of great examples, and it really shows that, yeah, women actually sometimes can be better than men at negotiating, because the research shows often that they tend to be better at focusing on relationships. They seem to be better at listening, asking questionings, focusing on interests, showing empathy. So there's no reason why you can't achieve. But the research obviously shows that women tend to be more comfortable negotiating on behalf of their organizations and find it much harder negotiating for themselves. And, you know, as I said, you know, it's important to back yourself, aim high, and don't feel that, you know, because, you know, you're asking for things that you won't necessarily get them, or it will impact the relationship. But there's obviously a huge amount of, going on a bit here, but huge amount of societal issues and cultural issues which link in as well.
Brilliant. And on that note, I mean, I can see in the chat already how much people have appreciated your time today. It's been brilliant, and so many practical tips that I'm sure we're all going to go away and use. But just to sort of wrap up, so many thanks, Paul, and for
You're very
everybody on the
welcome.
call. This has been recorded and it'll be on the website. So if you want to listen again, please do. And we'll also make sure those 2 books that Paul mentioned, we've got the details of those as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody joining us today. And good luck. I can't remember who it was, but somebody's got a salary negotiation next week. So good luck with that as well. Let us know how you get on. So great stuff. Thanks very much, everybody. Lovely to see you. And I hope to see you at, if you want to sign up for the I Am Remarkable workshops, please do on the website. And likewise, our next face-to-face event in London on the 1st of December, all about innovation in utilities. And Paul, please feel free to come along. I'm sure you get lots of people.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. And feel free to link up. I put my LinkedIn details a bit further up the chat. So happy to answer any questions you might have individually, but best of luck in all your negotiations.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Very much.